All systems go. Clear for liftoff. What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, aka ToeTagginTambo, back for another edition of Leverage Lane here on the Ship It Nation YouTube station. Got my guy Alex Blickle here, back in the booth with me as always. We're gonna break it all down. Had a week off myself, a little family vacation for the Zurich, but we're back in and we got a nice little run here. We got the Cadillac Championship we'll be talking about today. We'll be doing it as usual, breaking it down from a single entry MME leverage perspective, looking at the common builds, how we can leverage those. Going to talk a bunch about some good stuff with course fit and about courses. When you have a course like this where people haven't played it for so long, how do we handle that? Alex is going to help us break that down here on the show as well. I know everybody wants to get those takes, so I'm excited to hear that part also. And then, just going through it all, we've got a few other things planned. But Alex, I'll bring you in first, man. A week off at the Zurich. We're back in it. We got the Cadillac Championship, then the Truist. Then we got the second major of the year with the PGA Championship, amongst many other good tournaments. But we got a good little run here, my friend. How you been?
Yeah, this is fun. I do really like this golf course, so I think it's going to be fun to watch this golf course again. I do wish that we had a cut. Obviously, I do wish that the next couple weeks weren't so identical, and not just in the fact that we're going to get basically the exact same field back-to-back weeks, but it's back-to-back courses that at least on paper should really reward distance, should really reward driving as a whole. So it is going to feel like next week we're solving the exact same puzzle as we solved this week, but at least there is the added uncertainty of, well, we don't know how this course is going to play the way we do know how Quail Hollow will test them.
Side note on the culture piece, and it's not even like a shot or a joke. I'm just curious. Obviously, you saw a lot of stuff happen while I was away and we were away on this with the live golf situation. Yeah. If signature events exist because of that, right? I mean, pretty much that was the plan to how do we solve this? And it did not solve it. I don't think anybody likes this. The players have talked about it, even on from that front. We don't get to speak on their perspective, but just they've voiced it enough publicly that it's a thing. These events aren't spaced out. That's the problem with them too. Even if you are going to keep these around and you want to make this the way your league works, it's why don't we have any of these later in the season? If you want to make these, you're not really in the beginning. They said, we're going to make signature events. We're going to, every year is going to be a different sort of run besides the obvious. It's that hasn't really been the case. They haven't moved too much around. So do you have any do you think these hold long-term, or do you think they shake it up a bit and move them around? What do you think really ends up happening to these signature events and the likely when of live kind of changing gears, or at least, maybe not folding up completely, but something where it becomes less relevant?
Well, it sounds like we already have the answer. It sounds like Rolap has already kind of told us that, yeah, we're going to do away with these small field, no cut events, and everything's going to be kind of the same structure, which is it's not what we think of right now as a full field. It seems like it's going to be, 110, 120 guys, not the 150 that we see sometimes. But that to me is just going to be a lot better. So I'm very excited for that. And what I don't know yet, and what I hope we get is obviously that probably does not mean that all of the stars are playing every single week. So it does seem like we're going to get the natural variance from one week to the next that we have this week, right? Where there are some of the best players that aren't in the field. And so the top of the DraftKings pricing is going to look different from one week to the next. But then hopefully we also get a lot of turnover in what the bottom half of each field looks like, where, maybe it's because the exemptions into the event change quickly. And the way we have the next 10, the swing 5 or whatever it is, getting into signature events right now, maybe there's a next 50 that's consistently updating from one event to the next. So I think, and I'm hopeful that we're going to get much more diversification of fields in the coming years, which is great. And then obviously the huge thing and the far more important thing is that we're just going to get the fuller fields with a cut again, and golf will be back.
For DFS perspective, that's huge, right? We want that. That's for us. So we talk about it all the time on here. We got a bunch of good questions coming in already. If you guys can put your questions in here, we are going to have a bit of a little giveaway in a second. I'll get the marketing out of the way quickly from this side, but just the all access special, if you guys are looking to join Ship It Nation, is on right now, half price for your first month. So just to note that quickly, if you were to go to join the nation and click single sport for golf right now, it would be $59 a month or $79 with the optimizer. If you go back to where I just was and you want to join the nation right now, you can get all access with SaberSim, the $99 plan, for less than the non-access plan with SaberSim for the golf only. So if you want to check it out, you don't need a code. You just go to the site and click that link. But I bring this up because there is a gentleman, Mr. One Lighty, who I came second to at the Masters for 100K. He took the other 100 on top for 200. So congrats to Lighty. We had a big week there. We have another major upcoming, but he wants to start things off and give away a couple months all access. So for your questions here, we're going to answer them live. That's what we do on the show. It's meant to be sort of evergreen for the 20-30 minutes and tie in a lot to theory. And this one will be very valid for this particular week when we're talking about this course. And like I said, Alex is going to break down what do you do when you have a course like this. We haven't seen it in 10 years, and people are going to reference Adam Scott, and well, Tiger Woods is not here. He won this in 13. He won't be here this week. So, and what would their prices have been back then? Like Tiger Woods could have been Scottie Price back then. Dustin Johnson could have been Scottie Price in this field back then. All those factors, but Lighty will be giving away the money. And I will say, if you want to do it if you're not watching this live, it's for afterwards. Leave us a good comment for future topics that you want us to discuss during this evergreen period of Leverage Lane. Obviously, the show's going to be here to stay every week on this channel, 10:30 a.m. Eastern. So these topics really do help us sort of formulate what you guys actually want to hear us talk about in the beginning. And if you're watching this on replay, if you're live and you want to come back later, we do timestamp it right in the bottom. So you don't have to worry. If you're like, I don't care about that stuff. Just get to the chalk build, get to the common build. That's fine. You'll have to do it when we get there, but we like to go live for this segment. So Alex, I'll go back to you here. You mentioned one thing that's key too about the fields, and we'll get to it because we're gonna have a conversation about Scottie, the pricing change a little bit, the board, but like the M in McIlroy now seems to stand for majors, and they make fun of him because he originally said all the good players should play in these events, and now he's missing them, and I think he already committed for next week, so we'll see him back. But it's part of that scheduling factor too, right? You can only go to so many of these in a row, back to back to back, and like Scottie, I don't think he's playing next week, right? I don't think we're gonna see Scottie in between, are we?
I think that's right. And I think it just gets back to the idea that like the schedule just doesn't really make sense the way they did it, because at this point in time, all of the best players in the world are thinking about one thing. It's how do I get my game in the best shape possible so that I can win at Aronimink in the PGA Championship. And every single player is going to have a different idea of how they want to ramp up for that event. Some aren't going to want to play, 3-4 weeks in a row. Some aren't going to want to play the week prior. Some are going to want to play the week prior, but not the one before that. And so they just left themselves open to this possibility where a lot of the best players in the world were going to purposely take off a signature event because of the way they scheduled it all.
And you still get great players, like someone who wants to see Rory. It's unfortunate, but you get to see Scottie and whoever else you want to put in that echelon. It's like it's not like when you go to a Raptors Lakers game in Toronto, and it's like the only time they come to Canada. You're like, I want to see LeBron. Like, oh wait, LeBron's not even coming, or he's not playing in this game. It's load management, whatever. You're like, oh, it's my kid's only chance to see this guy, and it doesn't end up happening. It's not like that. So, Evan has some great questions coming in. I'll hit a quick one for you. I'll let you start off with this one. I want to add to his other one that I think I can elaborate on a bit further from some stuff I've talked with people about lately. But this is a common thing that comes up because we do talk on this very show about like, what is the chalk build? What is this week would be like, what is the chalk Scottie build? Because there's like a version of the Scottie build that's more popular. And there's probably the Cam Young versions that are the most popular, my guess, but we'll see. But what is your definition here of this when it comes to PGA DFS? And then he does bring up, he's kind of caught on to it, like with the price range or the slate dependent, certain ownership percentages, but there is a difference. Like when Tommy Fleetwood is 15% at 10K, but the guys above and below him are all 30%. He's 15%, which is much higher owned than the majority of the field, but he's really not chalk for that range and that, et cetera, et cetera. Do you have different thoughts on this, or where are you at on this question?
Yeah, I'm kind of a combination of the two, where I think the raw ownership does matter, but it only matters in such a sense that, like, number one, as you just kind of alluded to, the player has to stand out in his price range to be chalk. And that doesn't mean he has to be the most popular in the range. It could be that, like, there are 4 or 5 really chalky guys in a specific price range, but you're still then going to see guys around them that are significantly lower. So, like, as I look at our ownership right now, we have Min Woo standing out at 8,600. He's 20%. We also have, Colin Morikawa at 18%. I mean, I don't consider Morikawa the same level of chalk as Min Woo Lee, even though they're very similar in raw ownership. Why? Because Minwoo is the most popular in his range, and Morikawa is less popular than Cam Young, who's 400 above. He's less popular than Goddard, who's a little bit cheaper. So that's a major key. But the reason I say that we also do have to consider the raw ownership itself is because as you go down the board and you find, like a Jordan Smith might be the most popular in the 6K range, but he's going to be 12%. So do we consider him chalk? Maybe a little bit, but he's not popular enough such that him failing is going to dramatically affect not 6 for 6 percentage this week since there are no missed cuts, but it's not going to, him failing will not dramatically, change the score necessary to win this week or anything like that. And so therefore I don't consider him to be chalk the way that I do someone at 20%, because when someone at 20% fails, it does kind of change the entire landscape of the slate.
Yeah. And I'm going to do a better job moving forward. Like, obviously you just said that better than I could say it myself. So I'm good with that. But when there's points to add on or thoughts, I think that's what people would say. Like, we don't need to both describe it. And you did an excellent job. So I'll leave it mostly at that. But I will just say one part that I'll add on is I think a lot of people worry about defining chalk and the percentage of it versus how do you decide what to do with chalk, which is much more important. And our guy Kyle says down here, over at Ship It Nation, shout out to our guy, a big guy in the sky, Degenerate 75, who he's got there, the GOAT, says, the donkey chalk tag is relative to the players priced around them. So yes, Jordan Smith would get a donkey chalk tag because not many around him would be 12%. But again, another thing that people always forget that DJ said, we don't play donkey chalk except when we do. You do play it still. It's how do you play it? And you've done a great job of this in the past, talking about okay, but now how high is Jordan Smith in Scottie lineups because he makes them work at 68? Or how many people say, okay, I got my cheap guy in Jordan Smith, now let me go right up to the top in Scottie? Well, that's a game changer from a combinatorial ownership perspective. So you don't just need, people always say, Minwoo chalk got there or whatever it was. And it's they're so mad about it. It's yeah, but that person played Minwoo as their last guy in. Everybody else had him as their fourth guy in. And it's such a difference. It was a balanced build that finished out on a $7,800 or $7,600 Minwoo on whatever week it is. And then you could have got there in different ways. So love that question. Evan did have another one. I just want to chime in on this quickly, but it said, can you define the roster building terms of separator, high probability play? Is a separator under a certain percentage owned? Also, how many separators do you need based on the field size typically? I'm going to speak just more to the latter part of this only because, and you could speak more to it after, but I'll just note, if we knew the answer to that, we would just do it on every lineup. It's like in baseball. If you knew it was 5 threes that you needed, and by the way, I don't think that's the case from your research in your Discord. I've been following along, and you're doing an incredible job over there. If you guys aren't in Alex's Discord, make sure you go check that out. Ton of sharp people in there and just some really cool stuff that Alex is doing on his own stuff with data and Claude and getting involved and mixing it up. So appreciate that side of things. But just noting it, it's if you really knew that 5 threes were the answer, you would just run 155 threes and call it a day. And some people do that. I'm not, teach their own. I'm just saying we don't know. And all I'll add to it is in golf is you are on the right track, but thinking about it and then framing it up. And that's the concepts that we always talk about with over at Ship It Nation, FTN, Mastermind, your Discord, all these different things that we have and do. You can see links below if you want to check these things out. But just noting it, it's leaving money on the table, whether it's building with a different construction, you're fading popular ranges. I would say it's not who you play, it's how you play them. That's true. But also you say it's not just who you're playing, it's who you're not playing. If you're playing popular 9K guys, but you don't have Scottie, you don't have Cam Young, you don't have Jordan Smith, you don't have Hogard, you could still be fading 5 to 6 of the top owned guys, right? And then there's other factors to it. So there's a bunch of different levers that you can pull to help yourself separate. Typically, people will look at it and say you need less of those the smaller the field is, which also can be true and for sure is. But I'm saying you also, some people play a strategy, myself included at times, where I've talked about this, but in satellites, I'll boat race the thing. I'm playing to win or lose. I'm not often going to, a couple weeks ago, actually at the RBC Heritage, I had a follow-up, won a fantasy golf world championship seat. And people were like, wow, you didn't even need to sweat the playoff. Right. Because that's by partial luck, how it all shook out. But I'm saying the way I'm building and playing is typically going to be to win this thing. I'm not going to tighten up a lot in a winner take all because I believe it still needs, typically a really good score to get the job done. So do you want to add on to any of this stuff? I just kind of wanted to point that out for Evan because he asked a couple good questions here.
Yeah. In terms of how to define these, fortunately, their definition is pretty much just, what the title suggests. And so high probability play, very simply, is just someone who's likely to succeed and more likely to succeed than most of the players around him from a price standpoint. And then separator also, like, this is another one where you don't even have to think about like the fact that this is a quote unquote defined term. It just, what does it mean? And in order to separate, there are two ways a player can separate. Number one, he separates from his competition by putting up a really big score. And so he's literally separating by score relative to his competition. And then the second aspect of separation is that he's helping you separate from your competition. And he does that by, number one, getting the big score. And then number two, doing it where he's not doing it for a large portion of the field. If 40% of people have the guy with the separating score, that doesn't make him a separator because you still have to beat 40% of the field. Yep. So it's not about like a specific ownership percentage, right? It's not that at 16%, he's not a separator. At 14%, he is. It just scales. So the lower owned he is, the more capable he is of being a separator. The higher owned he is, the harder it is for him to separate. And it works as a sliding scale too, by the way, right? Where the more owned he is, the higher the score he has to get to actually create separation. So someone at 4% can give you like a top 20 finish. And if no one else in that price or ownership range has a top 20 finish, then he can be a separator. But if he's really, really popular, if there are other guys in his price range who do well, now you don't need a top 20 finish. Now you need a top 10 finish. And so it's just like a big, giant sliding scale in kind of all those ways. And so similar point to the one Tambo made, like it always, and I think this is just generally true, try and stay away from like rigid definitions of things where, okay, at 15%, like that's the turning point. That's when a guy becomes chalk or something like that. It's all a sliding scale. It's all relative to the guys around them. It's all relative to the field in general.
And we've talked about that great point that you just made too in the term a couple of weeks ago when somebody had asked about, do you guys use total ownership for your lineups? Like if you forced yourself into 85, I get it. It's probably solid long-term. It probably is how a lot of your lineups would shake out if you're using contest sims, et cetera. So I get that. But also if you do that and just force yourself into this bracket, it's like you could be building and missing out. You could be blocking yourself out, right? You can lock yourself out of a build. It happens in NFL Showdown all the time. Like people say, like, I'm going to do 48.5. So I'm for sure unique because I want to have like the limited number of uniques, but there's actually amazing lineups that are like 49.6 that come out and are still super unique, not duped by more than like 3 other people. And then you could still win 6 figures with that lineup, but you have no chance if you just block yourself at 48.5. You will have 150 more unique lineups in that portfolio, probably than most versus the average, I should say, like using a portfolio that's not doing that. But that's why when someone's like, oh, I got 150 lineups and they're all unique. And I go, look, like, how the hell did you do that? Oh, wait, you capped at 46,000 and you played for like the chance that it goes this way for you. That's going to be a long wait possibly. But yes, if it does pay off and you are right, you can really get paid off. So that's to each their own. That's more of a personal strategy. Real quick, Aaron, just heads up. This is like, again, some weeks we spend more time on this, some weeks we don't, but we do have Matt Gannon who does go with the actual boots on the ground, and he will be there the next 3 weeks in a row, including the PGA Championship. So he's going to be on the ground here this week. He already is and done. More on that in a second. He'll be at Truist next week for the same thing, and then he'll be at PGA Championship on the site. It's big for this one. It'll be a segue into Alex's topic here in a minute. He does have full course weather notes from what he's seeing around it. And then this week, because we haven't seen this for so long, it's, I think, awesome. He did a hole by hole for everything and wrote it out hole by hole for exactly what you're seeing, like what might be different, where the water's at, what it's all broken down, where it's very succinct. It's not like something like, oh, I got to read a 2-page novel or a full-on blog. No, it's there. Like I can fit it on my one monitor to get the key points. So if you want to check it out, like I said, the promo's there on shipitnation.com. Not going to keep pressing, but just noting he does have all of this accounted for, which is valuable specifically this week. And then this afternoon, it's a members only show, but he hops on and answers all the members' questions live on top of this stuff and wants to add that in. It could be helpful to you there. Alex, anything else you want to hit on, man? If not, I do want to get to this topic right away because I think it's a strong one. You had messaged me yesterday. I said I couldn't say enough good things about it, but it was like how to deal with a course we don't have recent data from. Like I talked about, I know there's Dean Burmeister and then the live guys that got the job done here, you know, and people will say, sure. But like, if you go back, a lot of people are looking 2016 and before with like that Adam Scott win in 2016. And then you had like Rose and I think it was like Rose, DJ, Tiger, and maybe Decky. I can't remember. But anyway, it looked like a 2013 Masters Millie Maker winning lineup is basically what it would have looked like. Yeah. But I'll let you talk on this topic.
Well, it's really interesting because it's a very unique situation, right? Like we've had plenty of events where we're playing a course that we haven't seen before. And so we don't have data. And so we're all kind of speculating about what's going to matter, what's not. And that speculation leads to certain narratives that get picked up. Like last year at with TPC Toronto, the whole field was in on, okay, this is a long course. Distance is going to be what matters. I looked at the course. I thought, it kind of looks like an accuracy course to me, even though it's long, and had a really good week just playing into that narrative. So sometimes it's literally just trying to find what people are wrong about. But this is a unique case because we actually, at one point, had some really robust data on this golf course. And we know, like beyond a shadow of a doubt, that this used to be a bomber's golf course. It used to be the case that distance mattered a ton on this golf course, and distance translated more than any other skill set on this golf course. But the question is it still going to do that? Is it still going to reward distance in that way all these years later? With the key being, number one, like the golf course could have changed a little bit. Conditions could change a little bit. The way they have the course set up might be a little bit different. But most importantly, the players have evolved. The players are a lot longer than they used to be. And so sometimes like Philadelphia Cricket Club, I think, is a really good example of this. When I played in the State Open, my level of distance was a huge advantage because it meant that a lot of those bunkers, those fairway bunkers, could be carried. And that makes it play a lot wider than it is. But then the PGA Tour players get on that golf course, and 75% of the field is carrying those bunkers. So distance isn't the same separating skill set, obviously, as it is in a Pennsylvania Open. But the same kind of concept can be applied here this week, which is distance used to matter a ton back then, but back then the average carry distance was probably like 265, 270. Now the average carrying distance might be 290, 295, right? And so are we going to see the same distance separation that we saw back then? My inclination is to say no. I think this is going to be a golf course that tests every aspect of a player's game. And if you want, we can actually take a look at some holes, because I do think like one of the thoughts that I've heard a lot, or one of the points that I've heard brought up a lot about this golf course so far this week, is that there's a lot of water. But one of the things that I noticed when I look at this course is the water comes into play a lot more on approach shots than drives. And so if you're looking for like comp courses, it's going to be tough because a lot of the courses with a lot of water, there's a balance between water on approach shots and water on tee shots. And you might even see like a stronger effect on a lot of the tee shots than on the approach shots, where this golf course, the effect is on the approach shots for sure.
Yeah, funny enough too, because you mentioned the TPC Toronto thing, and I want to go back and look, and that was like very true. Like I said, actually was like data golf as a thing, and it said like almost strongly favored accuracy when everyone was in on bombers. And if you go back, even looking at this course, the way they do it, for like the 14 through 16, it's leaning to the bombers side. Even one year being a strongly favored bombers, but then you go back to like the Justin Rose year, and it's almost strongly favored accuracy. It's like the same, it can flip just like that. So it's like, that's the kind, I know it's different, and we're talking about the course changes and all that stuff too, but just noting from now to then too. And then I wonder too, like even we had a little bit of a conversation pre-show, and like the bombers are the bombers, and I get it, but it's also like the setup of what we have now. Like a lot of these guys, like, someone would say, I don't know, you play golf pretty high end professionally. It's like, 305 or 300 is like pretty common, versus like 320 is like you got to be up there to be like the bomber now, but everybody else is definitely a bomber if you go up in it, besides you. But if I go up against somebody, everyone's a bomber against me. It doesn't matter. So it's like there's that part of it as well, and process that people think about. Do you want to share something here? I'll change it over if that's what you got.
Yeah, let's take a look at some of these holes, because I think it's easier to show this point than to just kind of explain it. So as we look at a lot of the holes, like this is not an uncommon look for a lot of the holes on this golf course, where you see there isn't really water in play off the tee. Fairway's kind of wide. This is a par 5 opening. And then the green is crazy narrow, and water comes right up against the green. And so you are going to have a couple holes, like 3, where there is water in play off the tee. There might be a guy or two who pushes it into this water, but quite frankly, like most of the guys, if they want, they can just aim at this bunker, leave it short. And this is an extremely wide landing area. This is not a difficult shot. It makes the approach shot more difficult. So maybe you'll have some guys try to push it past this bunker into this area here, and that would bring water into play, especially if they, don't make a contact, things of that nature. So it's not that like the water's never in play off the tee, but as we click through all these holes, here's a par 3, the 4th, water's all around. Here's let's see. Again, water's not really in play off the tee on 7. Maybe someone will blast it way right into the water, but you're going to have water very much in play on the approach shot. Same thing with 8. You can, most tee shots might be here. Now, if you do want to take on the green in 2, water's directly in play. Same with 9, right? And so this is kind of the picture that you see around the whole golf course. And the reason why I think, so here again, you see it on the par 3. These par 3s, by the way, are really, really good and really, really difficult. This is the only one that's, not even long, right? Like we have 216, we had 227 earlier. So really difficult par 3s. Now you get a drivable-ish par 4. They'll probably have it up one day where it's definitely drivable. And then other days, guys are going to be laying up over here and then hitting a wedge. So 17, you get the water right next to the green. And then again on 18, this time the water's maybe a little bit in play, but most drives are going to come into this area. So the water really comes into play on approach shots. And that does a couple things. Number one, it means that when you're hitting an approach shot, the difference between a good shot and a bad shot is larger than usual because, a mistake can be absolutely devastating on the hole. But it also means that guys are going to go after fewer pins. And so good shot or great shots, I should say, are going to be 12 feet, 20 feet instead of 2 feet, 4 feet, things of that nature. So in order to make birdies, you're also going to have to make some putts after you hit quality iron shots. And on some of these holes, like let's go back to that par 5 I was talking about here, 8. A lot of these approach shots, even if you hit a good drive, they're not going to be hitting the green. They're going to be bailing out into these bunkers or bailing out right. And now you have to, get up and down. And so around the green play is not just going to be about saving pars. It's going to be about scoring on some of these, reachable par 5s or semi-drivable par 4s. And so to me, when I look at this golf course, I just think every aspect of golf is being tested and tested well here. And I think that that's what we're going to see. Like I expect to see, you mentioned data golf earlier. One of the other things that they do is they show a slope where 1.0 means that, good players are separating from bad players as much as they usually do. And then if it's more than that, if you see 1.5, it means a traditional 1-stroke skill gap is a 1.5 stroke skill gap here. I talk about this concept a lot in the course fit model. We don't have a course fit model this week, but if we did, I think what we'd see is, boosts across the board greater than 0%. And so that's what I expect to see. Yeah, I do think distance is going to matter here. I do think distance is an advantage, but I also think being accurate off the tee is an advantage. Approach play is an advantage. Around the green play and putting are all advantages relative to the typical test on tour. I just think this is a really good golf course that rewards great shots.
Yeah, I want to ask you something else. Again, when you break it down like that, I don't know too much I can add value because it's huge, but I think that people should be taking this stuff away and filing it not just for this week, but for future, because you made some really good points. And especially when people can visualize it, it's that much nicer to see like, oh, that actually makes sense. Like, yeah, this guy might be 30 yards behind this guy or 20 yards behind this guy, but they're probably both going to have a similar third shot because the second is obviously not the same. One's much further ahead than the other, but it's not like a bomb and gouge setup of that kind of thing. And they may both have to bail out. And yeah, it's more likely the guy 30 yards back ends up sloping off the green and needs that around the green shot than the other guy that might be able to spin it a little or come in a little bit tighter with it, but it's not guaranteed. And if that doesn't happen, now it also becomes like, who has the better third shot? I mean, shit, we had this, I'll use API the year that Bryson was, going nuts and doing the pump off the tee. Who was he facing in the playoff though? And I get how it all played out, but I'm saying Lee Westwood. Like Westwood was 50 yards behind this guy, but because it became about like a third shot often. The first shot is cool, but it's even in the pros, drive for show, putt for dough. It wasn't just putting. It's like the other factors of the facets of your game become so much more important. I think is part of what you're pointing out here, what people are sometimes missing. With that said, does this come to mind to you for any thought process around this? Because give you just a quick example, you obviously know this quite well, but just pointing this out is like, obviously a Min Woo is going to pop in total. But a lot of what he's popping for is the distance factor, right? He can pound it out there. His accuracy is not what's factoring his total driving. It's really stemming off of the super low score. Your boy, you always talk about this guy, not really your boy, so I'll just bring up Michael Brennan. And not for this, just noting it, but like Michael Brennan is super long off the tee. His accuracy, not as good as you would think. It's like 60th or something, but he's gonna pop on total driving. Do you factor any of that in? Because even like Yella, Jake Knapp is super long, but they're not super accurate by any means. And do you think that could matter? And do you think that's like still where even when people are using total driving, they're getting a lot of those driving factors outweighing what could be needed?
I mean, I think total driving is a step up from using percentage of fairways hit or fairways gained, but like it still doesn't capture what we're trying to capture as well as simply looking at either strokes gained off the tee or doing what we do over at FTN, which is separating it into strokes gained driving distance and strokes gained driving accuracy. And so a couple of the guys that you mentioned, like Min Woo actually gained strokes with his accuracy. It's just that he's so long that he's going to hit fewer fairways, but he does a good job of managing his misses, missing on the right side. And part of that is decision making off the tee, right? So he doesn't always take driver when there's more of a premium on, avoiding a big miss. He doesn't go with the big driver. He hits the mini driver and keeps it in play that way. And so there's that aspect of it. Brennan is another one of those guys where like he gains strokes with his accuracy off the tee, even though he can't hit as many fairways because he's hitting it so far as some other guys. So yeah, I think total driving is a step in the right direction, but it still misses a lot of what it actually means to be accurate off the tee.
Perfect. Anything else on that topic you want to roll into? If not, we could talk about this week and bring it to a DFS perspective now, but anything else you want to add in there in the mix?
Well, yeah, I think the final point to make here is, okay, so we now have this picture of like what might actually matter and how this course might actually test players. And it's an all around test and not just a bomber's paradise. Okay, well, how do we apply that? Well, it means one of the things that we can look for is who are the really good players who aren't long off the tee, who are going to be really low owned because people just kind of automatically dismiss them because they don't have length. Guys like Russell Henley, Tommy Fleetwood. I don't think Sepp Straka is going to be totally ignored. I do think he'll be somewhat popular, but a lot of guys just like who fit that mold, I think are going to be really low, are going to be under owned this week. And then the flip side is I also don't want to play somebody who's only getting ownership because they have the distance. If they have the distance and are good throughout the bag, and they have a complete game, then I can still eat that chalk. But if the guy is popular only because he hits the ball far, but does not have the complete game, then that's somebody I really want to avoid this week.
I like that too. And I know this leads more to our segment later of like when we're going to sort of how to leverage the chalk builds and stuff, because the chalk builds are leaning towards this narrative right now of, just distance really, but some of the other factors. But I think you can also apply too, like if somebody does have, like, I think Keith Mitchell is a good example. Like I think he's fairly decent off the tee, like as far as like distance and accuracy goes off the tee, but like nobody wants him this week at 7,500 because there's too many other guys in that range that they need to go to. So you can do some mixtures of that as well. Like if you can find something, and it's again, a lot of people, Keith Mitchell, are you crazy? I don't care about a lot of the other stuff around. I'm playing the game, but I'm saying like that would be an example where it's like, wow, we now have someone who could fit these people's narrative, but then they're not even playing him. So what? He doesn't make the cut. It's like when people go with like an AM wave and like, but then they decide to cut out a bunch of guys, or when I talk about it all the time, when people play, you finally find a week, you might be wrong, but you feel like you have an edge because of an AM wave. And then you play a single entry. And again, some people like yourself, I get it, but I'm just noting it. Like when people are like, well, I just got to pick 6 guys. As long as I pick 6 morning guys, I'm in good shape. Yeah, you're probably better off than the rest of the field because you're doing something, you're following the right angle, all that. But if you really thought that was a true edge, wouldn't you want to kind of extrapolate on that and play more angles if you could, or if you're playing more lineups? So I think that's kind of how I look at this. If you can find guys like, I don't know, Keith Mitchell. Who else do I got here? Maybe I don't know, like Keegan's not super long, but obviously like certain guys that still have driving distance, positive notes in that range. You could look for that, but I like your call. The guys like Morikawa, Fleetwood, Henley, some of those guys that pop in those ranges that, aren't as long off that, but still have other facets of their game that would really fit this. You could also build around that. Do you think there's any commitment that's required to like go all in on your narrative? Or do you, because you've talked about this in the past, like the wave stacks, like why doing a 5-1 when you could just do a 6-0 and commit to it? Do you think if you're fading the narrative of the Bombers but going with your of like, yeah, they can still drive the ball. They're just not considered bombers. This is the case though. Would you want to be like a 6-0 on that if you're going against it?
It's perfect that you asked this question, because I was about to say, like, we're almost skipping a step here, and we haven't even talked about exactly what the chalk build looks like yet. But if you're trying to answer the question, okay, how do I pivot off of the chalk build? Like, to me, there are two obvious answers. The first is, okay, if distance is driving so much of ownership, then I have two options. I can either find all of the guys who are under-owned because they're not long, but they still project well and still have a good chance of succeeding here. Or I do lean into the same narrative that everyone else is leaning into, and I just find the guys who fit that definition who aren't popular. So like a lineup full of Keith Mitchell, Taylor Pendrith, who's been really bad, but he obviously hits the ball far. He's going to be like 3% owned. So if he finally figures it out this week, fits the golf course, could be a really valuable play. And to answer your question there is like, yeah, I do think it makes sense to really lean into one of those answers instead of trying to combine them, where you have a lineup that's like Keith Mitchell, Taylor Pendrith, Russell Henley, Tommy Fleetwood. Like that combination doesn't make a ton of sense. If distance really is so important here that it takes two guys who aren't as good as a lot of the players around them in Keith Mitchell and especially Taylor Pendrith right now, and vaults them into contention this week because that skill set's just so important, well, then you probably don't want Russell Henley in that lineup, right? If you have a lineup with Russell Henley, you want the field to be wrong about how much they're emphasizing distance. And if they're wrong about how much they've emphasized distance, it means there are under-owned guys in every single price range, and you don't need to go to the guys who are low-owned despite being long. You go to the guys who are just quality players and aren't long. So, that's when you go to Sepp Straka. Maybe that's when you go to Keegan Bradley or Shane Lowry, Ryan Gerard, guys like that. And so, yeah, I think whatever your answer is to how you want to combat this narrative from the field that distance is so important, I think you want to, tell that story throughout the entire lineup and not just two or three of the guys in the lineup.
Yeah, excellent. That's why I love doing these shows with you, because it's always like a great breakdown of it. But like I would call that almost like my own spin on like the landmine effect. It's like if you try and get the other stuff right, like you're saying, okay, I'm going to go 4 guys not with this, 2 guys with it. It's like you could just land on the landmine, and get that wrong, and that screws up everything else. You were right, but like that's what screwed you up, and that's dumb. But also on the other side of that, the flip side to the coin is if it's wrong, imagine the people with 6 of those in their lineup. They're so likely to have like 2 or 3 do really poorly. And while there's no cut this week, it's like that's still not going to work out well. They're like, yeah, they got everyone to play all those rounds, but it's like, man, they got 3 guys that just did horrible because it wasn't what you thought it was, and they probably would have been missed cuts had there have been a cut. So it's like that type of thing. Last quick question I have for you on this is just your take on no cut events and higher variance golfers. I was looking at it yesterday and talking with Mayo from the perspective of like spike rounds. And I know those are important. Like you can get those. You talked about earlier, if you get the 4% guy who gets you to the top 20, but 2 of those rounds, he goes super low and he actually scores you like top 12, then it's even more valuable. And then there's other factors, of course, and nuances to it all, but just noting it, like what's your take on the no cut strategy? And then we'll actually get to the chalk build. I know we're working a little bit in reverse here, but that's fine.
Yeah, it's funny. I kind of go back and forth on this answer, and I think over time I've gotten a better sense of it. And I think what I've kind of concluded is that it really changes less than we think it does. And here's why. Number one, everything you just said is 100% true. There's less risk on highly volatile players. There's less risk that number one means like volatile from event to event, but it also means volatile in terms of how they score. Guys who make a ton of bogeys and doubles, but also make a ton of birdies, like Ludwig Oberg, or guys who are cheaper than that, like Keith Mitchell, for example. There's less risk on those guys, and they can help score a lot more. But the fact that everyone plays 4 rounds also means that the cream is going to rise to the top more often than not. And so there's, there are instances of like someone this week who's fairly popular is going to have a bad first 2 days. And if there was a cut, they'd be cut. But then on the weekend, they're going to play really well, and they're going to end up being a good play because they were able to play all 4 rounds instead of being a chalk failure if they were cut after the second round. And so it kind of works both ways, where you have the lessening of variance in the fact that everyone plays 4 rounds, but then that's kind of canceled out, because that would say, okay, you should be less contrarian than you usually are in a full field event. But then that's canceled out by the fact that, scoring plays a larger role. You get those spike rounds, and, everyone now has 4 opportunities for a spike round, instead of some guys only have only have 2 chances for that spike round. So I think largely it just kind of all cancels out. And every time that we've talked about no cut events versus cut events, like, we've maybe been overemphasizing just how big of a difference it actually makes.
Yeah, I think from talking through it now and like just rolling it out on both sides and then getting all opinions and thoughts, I think one of the key factors is to more the former of what we just talked about with the other. Like, if you're going in on a, it's going to be this Bombers event, and you're going to find bombers that aren't as owned, the Keith Mitchells of the world, those types of spots. It's like, I'd still rather commit to that and then still go with this being the theory behind. Like, sure, if you can get more volatile, but like, as long as you're sticking to the first part, I think it matters more, because that's where you're likely to get those spike rounds from you being accurate on what you think the event is going to play like, and then getting the combination of your group to score like that, and so on and so forth. I think it really applies, especially like we talk about on the show, again, working backwards of how to leverage the talk about. But if you're doing single entry and you're hand building a lineup and thinking about all these factors, that's where you can really put yourself in a good position. On my MME pool, am I going to get some lineups that might somehow have like Russell Henley and Keith Mitchell? Very possible. And that's the way I play. It's going to be, maybe he's my one spike and it works out, and that's what I end up getting out of him. But in general, to your point, and building for single entry and leveraging it that way and all those factors, you are better to commit to what you're doing. And it's kind of like, you'll just, like you said, it's like, this negates it. Like, you'll get it or you won't from this, but the first part is what actually does the job for you. Hopefully that makes sense, but I think that's a really good way of putting it and tying the two together. So good stuff, man. Lot of good stuff here. A lot of good questions from people. Let's finally get to it. Talk to me about the chalk build. And then if you think it is like a Cam Young, and just the Scottie conversation is more of, there's a Scottie chalk build, of course, but it looks like this. But what about the actual chalk build for the week? Like, where do you think most people are landing this week?
I do think that most lineups are going to start Cam instead of Scottie.
Right.
We've got Cam at 31%, Scottie at 22% in single entries. I do think Scottie could come in over that, but I also think Cam could end up like 40 or 50% owned, especially because so many of the bombers did not show up here, right? Like, this is a place where I would have given a lot of consideration to an $11,500 Rory instead of the $13,500 Scottie. So the fact that Cam is like the lone guy who really, really fits that definition, I think he will be quite popular. I think it will be easy then for people to pair Cam with either Knapp or Goddard, and now they feel like, okay, I've got 2 guys who can really win here instead of just the one with Scottie. We talked about some of the values already. I think Minwoo is going to be popular. I think Nikolai Højgaard and Kurt Kitayama are going to be popular. Some of the longer guys. Gary Woodland has played so well of late and is one of, if not the longest guys in this field. So he's going to be popular. And yeah, so I think like it's weird because, we already talked about the idea that like we have 2 chalk builds where we have the first chalk build of with Scottie. We have the second chalk build, which might be even more popular this week, of the no Scottie chalk build. We also almost need like a third and fourth this week, which is, the third chalk build is the build where everyone goes in on bombers. And that's going to be kind of what we just talked about. Cam Young, Goddard, Minwoo, Kitayama, Højgaard, whoever fits. Woodland in there. Maybe one of those guys can't fit in there and you have to go cheaper, whatever. There also then might be just like, okay, who are people going to if they don't just go all in on this distance narrative? And then that might lead to, Adam Scott or Akshay Bhatia or Colin Morikawa. Maybe that's more when you get the Scottie lineups. And so I do think it's going to be a pretty interesting mix of lineups. Maybe Ryan Gerard, Sepp Straka get more love in those types of lineups. But yeah, I think the one thing that like we really need to avoid is I think the worst lineup this week would be a lineup of 6 of the more popular bombers, because it's more than just their individual ownerships. Like if you found a lineup that started Cam Young, Chris Goddard, Minwoo Lee, Nikolai Højgaard, the likelihood that Gary Woodland is in that lineup is a lot higher than his 17%, 15%, whatever the overall contest is going to be, because the start of that lineup clearly shows that the person building that lineup wants bombers, and Woodland is a very obvious bomber in his price range. So that to me is like the biggest thing that we need to think about when we're trying to avoid the chalk build, and then how to pivot off of it.
100%. I want to elaborate quickly on that too, just because you've talked about this in the past. We've done some really good NFL stuff together when we launched Leverage Lane was during NFL last season, like week 3, week 4, whatever. And then we ran with it from there, carried it over to PGA. People have seemed to love it. It's not for everybody, but if you want people that are actually playing the game at a high level, putting real money behind it, talking game theory, concepts, leverage that you can apply and get better at the game versus just the picks and the plays, this is definitely the show for you. But I will say, you taught me something really strong this last NFL season, right? Like about inverse correlation almost. You're talking about like, it's a stacking sport, like little things. I'm not going to rehash them all here. That's, for future conversations. But like when you talk about like the running back on the other side, but if you're doing that, what about the passing game that now has to catch up? It's like, you're not even going to a different spot. You're just making it for like, man, if this game just happens to go the other way, you're still in a great spot and you just get such a huge leverage piece from flipping it that way. And I won some pretty good money doing that. So it was awesome. And thanks to you. But I will say, when we talked about earlier in golf, where you don't get a lot of stacking and correlation. Now, when you do get like a skill set stack this week where a lot of people are trying for bombers, like you said, putting all 6 together or some version of that, it's not like inverse correlation so much to me, I guess, as like how we found the levers earlier and the separations that we talked about, whether it's roster construction, leaving money, pivot plays, totally different things that you're doing within your lineup and ways to find it. You're almost like reversing those in this situation where you're saying like, if you land on Cam Young, Minwoo Lee, and Hogard, it's so likely that 2 of Kitayama, Woodland, Jordan Smith, and Goddard are in there, right? Like you're getting that group, and that's what's coming together. So you're forcing yourself into the wrong corner of the building when you want to get to the corner of the building that has all the top heavy money, or the penthouse suite, like I was talking about. You want to go up to it. So here, it's pretty easy to see the ranges. It's like Cam Young, Goddard. It's Minwoo, probably Adam Scott, even though he doesn't necessarily fully fit that. That is all based on like sort of recent form mixed with the last guy to win here in 2016 when it mattered type thing or whatever. Hogard, Kitayama, Woodland, some version of maybe a couple other randoms there. And then at the bottom, it looks like it's like whether it's Corey Connors, Jordan Smith, Yella, that type of setup. So that can almost walk you in to the build. But on the flip side, to elaborate, it's like, isn't that also why we talk about like when you go to the chalk Scottie build? It's like, okay, let's go Scottie, Jordan Smith, Yella, like wherever you decided to be down low. Oh, now Gary Woodland fits. Now it leaves you just enough to get like a Hogard and down. You have to skip Cam Young, Goddard, and Minwoo. But you didn't actually do anything that different in the Scottie lineup. Do you want to elaborate any on the Scottie version and then talk about leveraging Scottie builds as a whole? Because I think that some people do still want to go to Scottie here because they're comfortable with no cut, all 4 rounds, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I want to ask you a question on that last point, because this is something that like I've thought a ton about, and I don't know that I have the right answer. So one thing that we know is true is that guys like Jordan Smith, probably Gary Woodland, Yella Miraju, Corey Connors, like all these guys are going to be higher owned in Scottie lineups than outside of Scottie lineups.
Right. For
you, does that mean that you are more likely to use them outside of Scottie lineups, or are you then like my hesitation with that thought? Because on the surface, it makes sense. You're getting them at lower conditional ownership than you would get them if you were using them with Scottie. That makes them better plays without Scottie than with Scottie. That makes sense, at least on the surface level. The hesitation that I have there is we know that Scottie's likely to do really well. One of the reasons why we're not playing Scottie from one week to the next is because we don't think that the Scottie lineup as a whole is as good as non-Scottie lineups as a whole. And the main reason for that is because the guys you have to use to fit him, like the Jordan Smiths, Yella Miraju, Corey Connors, they don't have the same upside that a lot of the non-Scottie lineups have. So if you're using them, are you then saying, all right, well, if Jordan Smith does really well, like I don't want to be helping the Scottie lineups because all of a sudden he's making Scottie lineups viable, and now Scottie winning actually can hurt me. Whereas if I don't play anyone that's going to be played with Scottie, and then Scottie does really well, chances are I'm still not hurt by the fact that I don't have Scottie, because chances are those guys down there didn't do super well. But if they do, and I have them, now I bring Scottie lineups back into play that I have to compete against. So like it's not the easiest thing to think through, but I'm curious if you have a strong thought already on this topic.
I wouldn't say it's strong, but I think it's a good talking point definitely to go in on, because a couple things that stood out there. One is like, listen, if we know Jordan Smith is the guy at 12, let's just say, and that's with Scottie, there is a chance those lineups are needed. Like it can get pushed up enough where that combo is what is required. There is still 4 spots within those builds to get unique. So it's more than likely that I'm not going to avoid that route purposefully. Obviously, in like a single entry is a different story. You might have to think about that. And is that really the 2 that you want to be in on, the highest and the low, etc.? I get that. But for me, thinking about it from a portfolio perspective and still leveraging it, I don't want that lineup that has Smith. It like fits together. It's like Smith, Connors, Yella, Kitayama, Hogard. Like that's bad. I'm not doing that. And I would have to avoid that group if going with it. But I might consider like the group that would be the most likely to separate, even at the ownership, sucks because it's going to be such a high group. And I'm going to have to avoid all these other guys not coming through. But I would build it that way. I wouldn't forcefully avoid it because of that being a possibility. To answer that part of it. The second part, though, is like with Scottie as a whole, is like how different can you actually get? And then do you just kind of land in like pivot spots in all of them? So you have the same construction, the same salary. You're getting no levers beyond your actual plays in the lineup. And that is what you're hoping to come through. But then it's like I always call it like Yahtzee Scheffler, because you got to roll the perfect dice with the already Scottie dice that you have. And it's like, man, that is tricky to pull off. And I think I'd want to commit a lot more lineups if I was going that route, because then I kind of got to just hope to get the right combination. Does that spark any other thoughts for you or anything extra?
Yeah, I think that's largely where I am. So the way that I would phrase it on this answer is, I think you can play one guy down there, provided that you think he's a really good play, just period. So like,
yes,
if I'm playing Jordan Smith, it's because I think he's one of the better values on the slate. And I don't think, and I recognize that in order to play Scottie, you can't just play Jordan Smith. You have to play other guys in this range. So if I think Jordan Smith is the only good play in this range, I can play him and then say, all right, Scottie lineups are going to be killed by the fact that they have to play 2 more guys in this range at least. The second part there is, I don't want to play anyone in that range simply to fit something. So like, let's say I like, 3 guys in the 9K range, and I say, okay, well now I have to go pick my favorite 6K guy. I don't want to go pick my favorite 6K guy if I don't think there's a good one. It has to be because that guy's a good play just in general. He's one of the better values on the slate and not just the best option in that range. If he's simply the best option in that range, I'm going to change what I'm doing elsewhere. I'm going to say, okay, one of these 9K guys needs to become an 8K guy so that I can upgrade Jordan Smith to Sepp Straka or Kurt Kitayama or someone like that. And now I'm totally avoiding that range.
I'm going to add a couple more things actually, because now you spark more thoughts for me. And it's like, it'll actually tie into like how to leverage this Scottie build as well, because it's a factor that I want to bring up. If you're doing a bottom up build just to do it, meaning you're starting with your favorite value play, if you're doing it just to do it, saying like, I know Jordan Smith pops in projections, so let me run this thing with Scottie, that's the wrong way, in my opinion, to do it, because you're just doing that to do it. If you're saying though, Jordan Smith is, I don't think anyone's saying this, by the way. I don't know if they are, but just noting it. Jordan Smith is a lock for me. He's a lock in at that price, because I think it's insane that he's that low. He should be 7,400. Like, this is just pure value. He allows me to get to Scottie and I'll figure it out elsewhere. That's different than the former. That the latter part of that is different. You're wanting him and then making it work. But I think the bigger factor here, and I know we're on Scottie, you can tie this to Cam Young lineups if you want, whatever it is you're doing. But if Scottie is your guy, that's the bigger picture here. If you think, and by the way, the guys that won these tournaments back in the day, yes, the driving distance and shit that we already went through, but it's like, yeah, the best ball strikers in the world at that time too. So if one of, if not the current, I know people give him some shit for some up and down this season, but Scottie, best ball striker, if he wins and separates by 5 strokes and is just needed, somebody has your combo that's required. And that's where I would actually do it the other way, Alex. And I would look at, okay, Scottie and who else? And not forcefully avoid it, because let's say you go Scottie, and I'll do a quick, I'm not going to do a full lineup, I'm just noting it. Okay, Scottie, I have 7,300 remaining. and I decide I'm okay. For me, for example, I'm going to stick with this theme, and I'm going to say, okay, well, it's Keith Mitchell here, and it's who else is another guy who's another bomber like Keith Mitchell this week in your like, is it Sam Stevens, Nikolai? No, yeah. that's not super popular though. Sorry.
Oh, that's not Pearson Coody.
Give me Coody. Okay, that's a great call. Let's use him. So let's say now, okay, I'm still sitting around that like average 7,200. I'm not going to walk the lineup down, but what I'm saying is if my next two guys happen to land me on Jordan Smith and Jordan Smith fit this build, that's where I was saying earlier that I'd be fine with that happening in my builds. And the reason is because, look, I got Scottie winning in this build, or else the build's in the garbage anyway, probably at 13-6 and with this field and everything that breaks it down. But my next four plays, it's not about the plays. The way my build shakes out, the next four guys in are all super low owned, and they still fit the narrative of what I'm going with in this build, et cetera, et cetera. And then if my last guy in, I think you did this actually at like, maybe it was the Masters with Siwoo. And you're like, yeah, Siwoo's kind of nuts, but he's also insanely priced at 7,600. Nuts to put in a lineup with all the other chalk. But like, if I land there as my last guy, when most have him as their fourth guy, or most are filling it with like three more chalk guys, I'm okay with it. So all I'm saying is, the point to be made, if my other two guys with Coody and Mitchell were low owned, and then I landed on Mitchell or on Smith, I wouldn't force in Pendrith just because. If that sounds great, it could work on paper, I'm saying, but I wouldn't force it in just because. I'd say, you know what? If I land on Smith here, I'm fine with it because everything else is built accordingly. And if that happens, it happens. So just noting that, I think that's important to remember as well, separating from the top and then seeing how the rest of your build goes as you shake it down. That is natural way to leverage the Scottie builds and still end up. But then you know what happens, right? Then they get there and people are like, of course that loser Jordan Smith got there that everyone made fun of at that price, at that ownership. And of course, Scottie wins. The chalk just always hits. But then we could be at the top with this exact lineup because really, were you playing those two with Keith Mitchell and Pearson Coody and whoever the other two end up being? Probably not. So that's kind of the factor that people have to remember. It's not in a vacuum. It's not Taylor Pendrith. You want to give me, you want to give me Taylor Pendrith 12-1, his 1% to the 12%, but we're not matchup betting here, right? Like the other stuff can still come alive for you within the lineup, and then people will get mad about it because of the chalk hit and hate on it with the Jordan Smith stuff. But there was thoughtfulness that went into the rest of the build based on everything we just explained. I don't know if you want to elaborate any further on ways to leverage the Scottie chalk builds, but I think there's just conversation pieces like that are more important.
No, I don't think I have anything to add. I think that was a really fun conversation. Hopefully everyone found it really valuable.
Anything else that you see, like even on the Cam Young side of things, like if you were like, is it like I talked yesterday a little bit like a 4-9K guy? Like, is there, do you think the 8Ks are just going extremely overlooked and have a high values in them? Like any other ways you can see from a single entry perspective that people want to look to leverage the chalk build this week with everything else you've already brought up here?
It's a little bit different this week. We've had that pattern a lot this year, right? Where the 9K range is full of chalk and then the 8K range is kind of all ignored. I think ownership's going to be really, really spread out through most of the 8 and 9Ks, where you're going to have some chalk and you're going to have very, very few like super low owned guys. So for example, between Morikawa at 9,800 and Fowler at $8,000, only one guy, Fowler. Actually, let me say that in a better way. Between Morikawa at 9,800 and Batia at 8,100, we have nobody projected in the single digits. So I think when you look for your separators, you're not going to find them there. You're either going to find them in the 7K range or the upper 9K range, where there's one guy who stands out. It's going to be the start of my leverage lane.
All right, we'll save it for that. Anything you want to add, or anything you have this week on the betting breakdown? Sorry, I'm just looking at a couple different things. I was giving. Got to throw these up there quickly. I mean, Aaron said thanks for all you guys doing the Leverage Lane show. Great info. And then just had Michael also say love this show. We appreciate all the feedback, guys. Like I said, let us know in the comments if you're not watching this live, what else you want to hear us talk about, any other topics you have. We're giving away 2 free months over at Ship It Nation with that said. But just as a general, we'd love that every week. We want the feedback. We want this to be for the people, if you will. But we think this is an important part of the game that nobody really talks about. And you can still go listen to podcasts that's focused on picks and plays. Not saying don't. If that's part of your content diet, highly awesome. I've done that too, and it's been a thing for me. But being able to take that stuff and then bring it across. That's what I was talking about with people in the mentorship class about like the bridge. A lot of people have over here experience and been around. I've been playing DFS for 5 years, but it never fully has clicked and I'm not quite getting it. And then they have like, this is a lot of good things. It's like, I'm learning this, but now it's making it a little bit conflicting. So the challenge is bridging it because their experience is coming this much. The thoughts and knowledge are coming this much, but then it's falls off somewhere in between there. We're trying to bridge that. That's what the lane is for, is to connect it so that you can cross it and be able to put this stuff together into lineups that can put yourself in position to have an opportunity. Does it still require luck? Absolutely. But there's a reason the same DFS players are having success, just like at the poker tables, things like that. We are playing a game here that is much more important than knowing who the best golfer is with this stat. The data, super important, especially in golf, but it's also ways to bridge it and put it together. So anything on that or the betting breakdown? You can hop
in. I think it's a really good point you just made. And I'll elaborate on it a touch where I think a lot of people who watch are waiting for a segment of like, here are my favorite plays, or here are who I think are the best value plays or the best pay up options. That's not the way that either of us think about DFS. So you're not going to get that from us, but you are going to hear a lot about specific players. Right. And so if maybe at this point in the show, you think, man, they really haven't talked about who they like so far. We actually have. We've mentioned players because the way we think about it is, if this is the type of lineup I'm building, this is the type of player that I'm going to be gravitated towards. If this is the type of lineup I'm building, it's going to be this type of player. And so, whether you have to watch it back or just, make note of that for future shows, like we are dropping our player preferences in these conversations. It just happens organically around the strategy that we're discussing in that moment. So I think, it's, for example, it's not going to be a surprise when you hear the main focus of my leverage lane, because I've already mentioned this player a couple times as someone who really fits this specific strategy. So can't wait to get to that part.
Yeah, we'll get there very very shortly. Losing my voice a little. It's going around this week, but I will ask quickly, anything on the betting front from you this week so far?
I don't have a single bet yet. I am hoping to add something. Part of that is because I'm trying to work on a specific tweak. I brought up the contention performance score last week, and so I'm trying to implement that as well as possible still into the actual simulations, and not just adjust the final percentage, but actually make it so that, like, it's feeding the simulation of, okay, this player in the simulation just got into contention. Now let's see how well he performs there. So I'm trying to implement that, and I'd like to have that finalized before I make any bets. But the other reason why I didn't make any bets this week is because the guy who stands out the most in terms of, like, hey, his win odds are better than what his implied price is in the market is Jake Knapp. But Knapp has some injury concerns that I'm not sold on, so I didn't really want to make that bet. And so at the moment I don't have anything, but it's been as we've noted a couple times now, it's been a really good year for PGA underdog picks. And I didn't do anything at the Zurich, but I know a lot of guys in my Discord actually hammered the Zurich and did extremely well there. So that was fun to see that they kind of took the initiative themselves to do it. But, even the week prior, we had an awesome Sunday that would have been massive Sunday if Woodland hadn't hold out for Eagle on the 18th hole. So that was a poor run out, but it was still a really good, like, $5,000 Sunday. That's kind of been a theme. So even if we have no bets going in, I'm confident it'll be a great betting and pick 'em week, because that's kind of been the theme all season.
I also think there's a lot to be taken away that, other people have brought this up in the past. I didn't see it today in the comments, but I know a lot of people in the Discords talking after, like, man, on leverage lane, I get a lot of concepts that I can apply to betting. And obviously there's a very clean cut one there. If you've got a matchup bet where it's like a bomber versus an accuracy guy or something like that, like, you probably are getting pretty good odds, or at least equal odds on that side of it, where you can take advantage of those. You could run some round robins with it. Even, I know everyone's always so focused on the outright market. I'll tell you what, the MLB sweats lately have been decent for me, and I've had a couple good shots there, and I've made some good money just, like, down the stretch of, like, the inning by inning stuff, and being able to see some of that, like, where it's like, oh, well, now if this happens, this is this. It's like you can kind of use them both to your advantage, and golf is definitely that way as well. Jason says, love the analogy of the quote-unquote bridge. Exactly how I feel playing golf DFS. I used to be a content fanatic and have discovered how hard it is to bridge them together. It's like I say, I talk a lot about this with people in the mentorship classes, like their content diet. I'm not trying to change that, But it's like typically when someone's trying to come get help with DFS, it's like the same thing. I know your goal. It's like if I go to a personal trainer, of course I want to lose weight and get healthy. That takes a lot of time, effort, discipline, sacrifice, et cetera, et cetera. We're not saying it's any different here. These are the people that have the 10,000 plus hours. I never counted mine up, but I'm sure it's a lot of hours, as is it for you. It's like we're trying to, and we're still not going to be what people would say like masters of the game. It's the idea of trying to get after it, being obsessed with it, and just noting it. That when I know when people come in, oh, I want to win money. Of course you do. But what are you doing and what's different? And I find what a lot of people get stuck on is spending so much time on just picks and plays and not recognizing that much like a chess game, we all have the same board. We all have the same pieces. In chess, it's even worse, by the way. If I play the number one chess player in the world, I'm losing 100 out of 100 games to them. They're just way further ahead of me. It's not even close. DFS brings some variables, the variance, the sports, the luck, the factors into it a little bit more. But if you just play the long game, both with contest selection, bankroll management, all of this stuff together, that's where you can actually be able to apply this stuff and put it in your favor. So hopefully
you and I could talk about this kind of stuff for hours and hours. So I don't want to go too far into this route, but I love the analogy you just brought up of like seeing a trainer, because DFS, I think the way that we try and present this show is kind of akin to like who's going to get better results in the gym. Someone who goes to see a trainer, does the exercises that they're told to do, and then goes home, or the person who like really wants to kind of understand why the trainer is giving them those exercises. And over time, they come to really believe in the program and they understand why they're doing the things they're doing and how to implement that in the rest of their life with the way that they eat and things of that nature. And obviously the person who's like really involved and wants to learn and understand why they're doing the things they're doing is going to see better results. And I think that's every bit as true, if not even more true, for DFS. Yeah.
Got to be willing to do it though. That's the factor, right? You're going to have to make some sacrifice from that perspective. One and done conversation. Who are we thinking for this week? Any quick thoughts on one and done? And then we'll get to our leverage lane for this week.
Yeah, I don't actually have like a strong lean for us. We do have Cam Young still available. He's probably the best option. He's also probably going to be the most popular option. So
let me ask you this then. I did have a quick question because again, I learned way more on this stuff from you than, just figuring it out myself. But like we had this Goddard up conversation earlier in the year. And I know, some people say it could go against the narrative. Of course, he's a bomber, et cetera. But my point would be a lot of people that had Goddard up and got the money from him, well, they're done with him. Other people have tried to, implement him since then. And, I think the best result since that win 3 months ago was like a 6th. So they would have got some money for that for sure. I'm trying to see if I can remember what event that was. Hogard came out. Gary Woodland when he won that week. So just noting it, like, is this a spot to roll Goddard up? I know it could be in the secondary ownership range, but you also would get a lot more money for him than most have him at, even for like a second or a third, I think.
Yeah, I think this is a very good spot for him. And if we had him available, I would say we can use him, but we do not. And that's why like talking about one and done at this time of year is so difficult because everyone has different guys available and everyone's in different situations. And so I think this conversation is less about like who we actually want. Now you and I can pick our guy, so we have to make that selection. But I think for anyone, who's playing one and done, the number one question you have to ask is, do you want to find a bomber or do you want to go against the grain and find just a really good player who's going to be low owned, not because the field doesn't think he's good enough in this field, but because he just doesn't fit from a skill set perspective. And so my top selection for this week would be Tommy Fleetwood, because I think he's going to be low owned and he's, certainly one of the more likely guys to win. And he even gets the advantage this week of like, this is one of the weakest top ends of a signature event. And so I really like the idea of playing Tommy this week.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I also think you've talked about this in the past, but obviously the, sort of the ownership, if you will, in one and done, it's just a way if you want to get someone who's still really good, but low owned, oftentimes it is just to go against the grain of that narrative. That's what you were saying with Fleetwood, but other guys that fit that mold could be like a Henley, for example, or like certain guys down the board. You can go to others, but just noting it, if you've got those guys left, you feel like, man, I don't want to touch Henley at 9,900 in DraftKings in my single entry because I feel like it's this. Funny enough, I see you smirking, but we'll go there. But just noting it, if you didn't want to, I still think a guy like Morikawa would get one and done ownership because of his recent form and all that. So you'd get really different with like a Fleetwood or with a Henley. And so who do we have that we can use? Because I'd kind of favor those two.
We've got Tommy.
Yeah, let's use Tommy.
Cool. And I was also smirking at Jordan's comment. So
I was, man, like you said, we could talk for days. We usually go like an hour 15, so we have 6 minutes and only our lane to get to. Do you have Good Life Fitness in the US?
Yes.
I think it's super popular. I'm pretty sure it's like, nationwide or like North American, whatever. Anyway, they definitely do hire some very questionable trainers. So the difference in that, I'll say, is you usually pay a little bit less. Like it's less money for these trainers, and they're more on like, giving the right form to people, and like they're very well trained on that stuff. So I think people need to recognize what you're going to a trainer for and what your goals are and all these factors. But you also kind of, it's not to judge a book by its cover, but you can get what you see. And then you need to tie it to your goals. You don't just look at them and say, hey, they don't look like they're in shape, they must not be a good trainer. They could be a really good trainer on like, here's how to start off. If you're just starting off, here's good form. Here's how you do this by the book, textbook, and why. And here's nutrition facts and et cetera, et cetera. But they're not living the lifestyle. So that does get a little bit tricky. My trainer, for example, I'm going for something different. It was like, he's very in shape. He's got, years of testimonials. It's like, that's, it's accountability too. I want that from him. He's like, you want to be at this, but you don't, because the last 3 weeks say this. Okay. And like on vacation, well, that's fair. You wanted that though. So now we're going to do this. And he's not mad or like holding me accountable in a bad way, but it's truthful to the fact. It's like, yeah, you got to just deal, man. You knew that was the consequence, but you should enjoy vacation. You're with your family. You're at all inclusive. It makes sense. Chill. You're allowed to have that. And now I know you're disciplined and you're going to get right back on track. And very quickly we're back on track. So what were your thoughts on this when you saw it? Because I think that's important as well. With us, obviously, people could see our track records and history and credibility and reputations, which are extremely important. But what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's 100% true that some trainers are absolute knuckleheads. But I think that's also, ironically, like one of the reasons why you should try your hardest to learn, whether it's about trainers or evaluating, analysts that you see on YouTube shows around the DFS industry. The more you understand the game, the more you understand, the concepts, the easier it is for you to recognize this guy's kind of talking out of his ass. This guy doesn't, this isn't an opinion that I want to put a lot of stock in, and this one is. And so, it kind of all works together. The more you can learn, I think number one, you're going to have a lot more fun. And then number two, you're just going to have a better kind of instinct about everything involved in DFS in this game that we love.
Yeah. So sometimes people are just doing the job. If we're flipping to DFS analysts, not to be like call people out, I'm not going to go by names. So obviously some people are doing the job versus some people are extremely passionate about it. And this is like their everyday. For you and I, we could literally sit here for hours. We're actually due for a new mastermind re-up where we can just hash it out and talk everything. And that's got, a lot of good stuff on. I got some more coming on that here shortly. But just noting it from the lane perspective this week, let's finalize this out. You said you were kind of all set with yours. It sounded like you're in the 9K range for that. I thought that smirk might be for Russell Henley, but go ahead. Let's hear where you're at.
Yeah, it was perfectly timed then, because my leverage lane is this concept that I was talking about earlier. I want to go all in on players who are really, really good, just through the bag. They don't need to be long. I'm not going to penalize someone for being long, but I know that I have the best chance of finding underowned guys by looking at guys who aren't long, because the field is going to dismiss them, even if the rest of their game actually fits this golf course really well. Russell Henley is the picture perfect prototype of the type of player that I'm looking for. Tommy Fleetwood also fits this mold. I think Sepp Straka fits it well. I mean, like, honestly, there are a ton of guys in this field who fit this idea and fit this concept. And so it's not going to be difficult to build a lineup full of these guys, but the concept is the leverage lane more so than Henley is the leverage lane, because the concept is I'm finding underowned players because the field thinks distance matters as like the lone predictor. And I'm saying, no. All aspects of golf matters on this course. Yes, you get a benefit if you're long, but accuracy, approach play around the green, and putting are all going to play a key role this week. And I think they're all going to be separating skills in and of themselves. And so I want the guy with the complete golf game more than the guy who's long off the tee. And I think ownership's going to be the opposite of that.
Yeah, that's kind of why I brought that up. And I thought the other thing really interesting about Henley, he was actually one of my considerations before the show, just as again, you're talking more concept wise, and he fits that bill perfectly. But just noting it also was because the squeeze spot, like we talked about yesterday, like nobody is going to want to pay 9,900. Like, what has he even done that makes him 9,900? No one knows, but it's that angle of it. But it's really that he's squeezed perfectly between Cam Young and Colin Morikawa. I think and I'm not like trying to steal yours or stick to it, but I mean, one thing that is extremely interesting to me is a concept as well of like pairing together. Like so many people are going to look at that and say like, oh, then let me just pivot off Colin Morikawa and go to Henley if nobody wants him. But why not play both? Right? Like why can't you just play those two? So that's not my lane. I just want to give that example first of saying like that's a concept or theme that you can take away from that. I think too many times people focus on like, hey, found my pivot, now move on. It's like, well, what if it's Henley and Morikawa down the stretch? Both their game styles would fit your point of what you talked about, and you didn't have to pivot just because one had ownership. That difference maker of firing Henley in at $100 more than Morikawa, less than him, but then using Morikawa with him that still fits your build could be a way to go about it. But for me, I think the main thing is in like the 7K range. For my main lineup, I always talk about mine from like my sticking to our original theme of like the $200 single entry perspective. I'm definitely going to be looking to get different in the 7K range. Like I actually don't, I in my main lineup, I won't have Kitayama, Hogard, Woodland, or Yella. Like none of those four will be in my main lineup. And I'm going to try and I'm also very unlikely to have Smith in there either, just so you guys know. So I'm more likely staying in the 7s and above or going to like the really lower 6s and build up from there. I still have it in my head. My other concept was going to be, and this could work for it, so you could tie the two of them together just to be, not wishy-washy on it, is I still have the concept of like 3 9K guys, maybe even 4 as being a possibility. That's why I don't just want to say that. But yeah, none of those 5 guys in the 6 or 7Ks will be in my main lineup at all. Even if I get to that concept I mentioned earlier, I wouldn't land on it. Like none of those 5 will make it in. So fading all the chalk from the 5 guys I mentioned, 7,800 and below in my main lineup.
I like the point that Scooter made in the chat, and one of the things that you and I have talked about in the past that kind of fits this concept perfectly is that we care more about course fit when we're looking down the pricing board, because the best players in the world can spike anywhere, and I think that's why like Henley and Morikawa don't pop on long courses because their games are especially suited to long courses. It's that their games are complete; they can play well anywhere. So I think that's more of the signal you're seeing there. But yeah, and then when you do want to look for the the course fit specialist, it matters more for even like this guy's still a pretty good player, but like Keith Mitchell's going to benefit from a course that mutes the importance of putting and around the green play and really rewards the importance of driving. Like that's obviously going to be true because he has a severe strength and a severe weakness. The guys at the top of the board don't have severe weaknesses unless you're talking about Siwoo Kim's putting or Russell Henley's driving distance. But, Russell Henley loses fewer strokes with his driving distance than, Keith Mitchell loses on and around the greens. I think that's pretty clear. So, just another concept to kind of always keep in mind. And I love the fact that it gets perfectly applied to this leverage lane.
Yeah, exactly what we were just talking about. So that's perfect. All right, man. Awesome being back here in the booth with you. Let the people know everything else you've got going on, where they can find you. Like I said, if you're not in Alex's Discord, he'll pump it up in a minute, but I would highly recommend checking it out if it's, something you can get to. But if you want to learn and get better at all the things that we talked about today, certainly one of the places you'd want to be. But what do you got on the go, man?
Yeah, at Alex Blickle 1 on Twitter. You can find all FTN stuff and my Discord through that link. And yeah, you kind of alluded to it earlier, but we're doing some really fun stuff over in MLB, just kind of dissecting what the field is doing, what types of strategies are working really well, what kind of stacks are working really well. And it's kind of like an ever evolving thing, right? Like it's not that I posted it a week ago and just going to leave it at that. It's like I'm kind of posting stuff every single day, learning together, learning as a community, what's working really well and the types of strategies that we should be taking.
Yeah, I will say this. I'm much more of a lurker and a reader because I don't actually fully get it all. But like, I'll catch on quickly. And as I have questions, I'll shoot you a text and ask. But I think like just the idea and the concepts are really creative right now for what, everything that's going on in the world from like an AI perspective and being able to like tie it together and people being so worried that like is going to end human nature, like of everything else. Like we're still naturally, wanting to create, wanting to learn, wanting to be able to tie these things together and use them. And I know, just with that said, actually, too, I want to, I'll try and show you if I can. I don't know if it's going to let me bring this back up here, but like,
as you bring this up, did you catch the discussion in the brain teasers about the hypothetical?
That thing is so hard, man. I'm like, I always like try again. I'm the first to tell people like, I get like understanding things and knowledgeable and this, I'm sure if I applied to it, I could do better with it, but man, those things get me. Like, I'm just, it's not my it's not always my best thing. I'll say it that way.
Well, the recent one that I posted that we had like this really awesome discussion on, and this is part of what I love about the Discord. It's like it's just a fun community to be a part of. It's like it was just a thought experiment really that we were discussing. There is no right answer. It's just I'll pose the question here. People can put their answer in the comments, or we can talk about it at the start of next show. But the question is, imagine, let me phrase it this way. Imagine you're randomly selected as a group of 100,000 adults around the world, and you're presented with a question. You can either press the blue button or the red button. If at least 50% of people choose blue, everybody lives. If fewer than 50% of people choose blue, then only the people who selected red live. Which button do you choose? And I like this because, number one, like, you get a bunch of different answers, but the reasoning that people cite for their answer is like amazingly variant. I couldn't begin to have predicted how many different types of answers we'd see, and it just led to some really fun discussion. And that kind of thing is always going on in the Discord. And then, like you mentioned, the fact that, like, you know, a lot of people are a little bit confused or don't understand what's going on with the AI progress. Like, we have a channel specifically devoted to just talking about AI and Claude Code and how I've used it, and you know, the best ways that I think people who are interested in that type of thing can start to use it. So yeah, it's just a really kind of enjoyable community, I think, to be a part of, and a helpful one too, both in DFS and just from a general perspective as well. So check that out through my Twitter at Alex Blickle 1.
Agree 100%. Still don't know the answer to the question, but I think the key part you said is, like, it's actually better to see the answers people give and how people validate things and the why, and everyone thinks so differently on that. It's like you have your reason you have your click, but then what's your reason for that click? That's what's actually sort of works the mind a little bit better, and why it's, you know, it's always good to work the mind. I think mental fitness is something people don't talk about enough. We had fitness conversations around physical, but oftentimes it's like the mental side where people never can visualize their brain being like flabby and overweight versus having a brain with a six pack. It's just not something that you would visualize out there very often because you don't see it. But it is, you know, a big factor, and people that have sharper minds typically can do different things. We don't have it up yet, but there is a new feature coming this week. Some in the Discord have already seen it, but we're going to beta it over on the site and been doing some stuff with Claude and AI on the showdown projections and stuff like that, and taking our data and then lifting it into a different area. So yeah, I'm excited for that. It'll be on the site this week. Again, if you guys want to go check it out over at Ship It Nation, you can right now get all access for your first month, less than the price of golf on its own, PGA only, that and get SaberSim included, which usually that's $79 a month for just PGA only. So check it out. If you guys want to do that, you can find me on X at ToeTagginTambo. It was awesome to be back with all of you. Make sure to leave your comments. Our guy Lighty is giving away 2 free months over to Ship It Nation. That's going to do it for this one, guys. Thanks to Alex. Appreciate you guys for watching. For Alex, for myself, ToeTagginTambo, good luck this week. Let's ship it.